On today's episode, I'm going to explore 3 different categories that I put foods into so you can understand why you might be more stressed out than you need to be. I'm going to open this episode by reading something. The relationship between nutrition and trauma is both profound and underexplored. We spend decades in therapy talking about every aspect of our lives, except for what we eat. When is the last time your therapist or coach asked you what you had for breakfast? You can do all the therapy in the world to heal from trauma and better manage stress, yet still be including daily food practices that are causing stress inside of your body. That's a small paragraph from a chapter in my upcoming book, which comes out in spring 2026. Yes, I have written a book and I'm in the final stages of having that book edited, and then it will go off to being printed. And in spring 2026, hopefully you'll be holding it in your hands because it is 20 years of information of mine in one place around the relationship between trauma, somatics, nutrition, and how they all come together. But what I'm going to talk about today are 3 categories that I put foods into that have helped me and thousands of people around the world better understand their choices and the reactions in their body that come from those choices. The first thing I want to say is think of stress. Stress isn't something in your mind, though it definitely affects your mind, and your mind can be a cause of stress. But stress happens in the body. It is biological, it is biochemical, it is glandular. Stress is happening when your adrenal glands are being stimulated and you're creating more adrenaline. More adrenaline in the body creates what we call the stress response. This is what creates feelings of overwhelm and pressure and that blood pressure rising in your body, anxiety. These are caused by high levels of adrenaline in the bloodstream. So your adrenals are a big part of your stress response and even the feeling of being stressed. This is important because your adrenals have a stress response when things happen in the outside world. When you get a sudden call that shocks you, when you lose your job, when somebody dies, when you almost get in a car accident, when you're being bullied, when you're even taking in global crises through medias. Looking at things in the outside world that are stressful or overwhelming causes a stress response in the body. Your adrenals respond to that. However, one thing we don't think about is how the adrenals also have a stress response to when things happen inside of the body that's overwhelming. We tend to just focus on the outside world being overwhelming and how we can change that. But what about our internal landscapes? This is what I'm going to walk you through in today's episode, through 3 categories that I've put food into to help you understand what's contributing to your certain ailments and even your stress responses and triggers. I designed these 3 categories over many years of being in private practice as a nutritionist. I was working with many people, noticing that certain foods were having certain reactions in their body and mine, and certain emotions and even trauma histories would create an expression and movement towards certain foods. So these are not necessarily categories that exist on any official level besides my own practice and philosophy. Yet there's lots of scientific backing to these, which is very, very well researched and documented in my book. But I'm not going to be getting into too much of the science today, except for one thing toward the end. But what I want to do is start introducing you to these categories so you can have this shared language with me, so you understand what I'm referring to in past and future videos I make. The first category are the stimulants. Stimulants, just like it sounds, stimulate the body. They do this directly by stimulating the adrenal glands or indirectly by stimulating the heart or even the nervous system. Now, what's interesting about stimulants is we use them to be motivated. We use them to move into the world, to push forward. And they include things like coffee and teas and chocolates. And they also include starchy foods and refined carbohydrates because if you look at my past video, you can find the correlation or connection between starches, refined carbohydrates, and adrenaline. Because anything that turns into sugar rapidly and causes a spike in glucose will also cause a subsequent spike in adrenaline, which I'll get to in a moment. So an example of a stimulant is waking up and having a starchy breakfast. Cereal, waffles, muffins, pastries, bagels, and topping that off with a tea or usually a coffee or a dessert coffee, like I like to call it, the kind you would find at Dunkin' Donuts. Again, stimulants stimulate you so you can come up out of a depressive state into a more functioning state in your brain and in your body. The second category are the depressants. Just like it sounds, they depress you. But how do they do this? They do this by exhausting your body. These are the foods that are very calorically dense. And when you eat them, it causes postprandial blood flow, which I have a whole episode on, which brings your blood pressure from your head down into your heart and belly. So it helps you feel a little more balanced, less up here, more grounded, which is interesting, but it only lasts temporarily. Once you digest the food, you go back to your baseline of anxiety, and this is why compulsive eating cycles continue. So these are foods like pastas, fried foods, alcohol, pizzas, and overeating in general. These all can have depressant effects on the body, which just means depressing down the energy that wants to come up into anxiety. Now, why would we want to use depressants? Because we're anxious, because we're overwhelmed, because we've been stimulating our bodies all day. And now that it's nighttime, we can't make melatonin, a hormone for sleep, and we can't settle down. So we feel even more anxious the quieter and more still we get in our beds at night or on our couches. So, in order to be able to settle down and relax and fall asleep, we require something to exhaust us. And it works until we wake up at 1 or 2 in the morning with an anxiety attack or panic, and we have to eat more food to depress us to get through the next 3 or 4 hours of sleep, which then we wake up completely exhausted and groggy, and we need a stimulant. I call this cycle seesaw regulation, where we are using stimulants to get through the day, depressants to fall asleep and stay asleep through the night, and then the cycle starts again the next day. Most people live off of stimulants and depressants. The third category are my balancers. The balancers are so lovely. These are whole earth foods. These are nuts, seeds, vegetables, root vegetables, my favorite vegetable from the sea, seaweed, whole fruits, especially when they're seasonal, whole grains, beans, and animal products. These foods give much more than they take, and they don't rapidly convert into glucose like refined carbohydrates tend to, or other refined foods. These foods don't necessarily depress your system and exhaust you because whole foods are bound to fibers and lots of intricate, complex minerals and nutrients. So your body knows when to stop because it's a whole food, like I like to say, with its whole intelligence. So there's a relationship between that food and your body. Your body gets the nutrients it needs, and it stops you from eating more of it, usually. But again, these aren't the foods we grab to when we're stressed. When you have a long day at work, you don't fantasize about having steamed broccoli when you come home. You don't think, I'm going to have some salmon and beans. This has been a hard day. You usually think, I'm going to have potato chips. I'm going to have pasta. I'm going to have pizza. I'm going to have macaroni and cheese. We want the foods that are heavy, the foods that comfort. Balancers don't necessarily comfort, they nourish. So they settle our bodies to feel whatever it is we're feeling. And that's usually what we're trying to avoid feeling. Now, what does all this have to do with stress? Well, we manage our stress with stimulants and depressants, as you can hear. But one thing that's really interesting that has just been recently more researched is the relationship between your adrenal glands and your blood sugar levels. I'm going to read this study. This study comes out of the National Library of Medicine. It says, adrenaline is a hormone that has profound actions on the cardiovascular system and is also a mediator of the fight or flight response, your stress response. Adrenaline is now, and this was written in 2016, increasingly recognized as an important metabolic hormone that helps mobilize energy stores in the form of glucose and free fatty acids in preparation for physical activity or for recovery for hypoglycemia. So let me repeat that. Adrenaline is used in the recovery from hypoglycemia. That means low blood sugar. What causes low blood sugar? Well, the obvious sources is starvation, skipping meals, intermittent fasting, or long-term water fasting. That's going to cause a massive drop in blood glucose within a couple hours, and you're going to have more adrenaline to convert that stored glycogen, which is what we call stored sugar, into usable glucose. So essentially, in a nutshell, adrenaline is used to transform stored sugar into usable sugar. But why else would you have low glucose? Insulin. Why would you have insulin? Increase spikes in blood glucose. So when you eat very sugary, very starchy, refined carbohydrate food, even a lot of processed oils can do this, you'll have an insulin response because your blood sugar is going up rapidly. But an insulin response means your blood sugar is going to also drop rapidly, especially when it's a spike in insulin. If your blood sugar is going up gently and insulin is coming up gently to meet it, there's a nice balance. But when you're getting a spike in blood sugar, you're also getting a spike in insulin, which means a drop in glucose. When your blood glucose drops, your adrenal glands turn on to convert stored sugar into usable sugar. So It's pretty easy to understand. Whenever you eat stimulants and depressant foods and they eventually raise your blood sugar, you'll most likely have several insulin responses through the day, which means you're having several stress responses or adrenal responses through the day, because adrenaline is used to help balance your blood sugar levels when they're low. This is a really important finding and a very important piece of the puzzle around stress eating and people who are actually suffering from PTSD and chronic stress, anxiety, overwhelm, agoraphobia, insomnia. All these symptoms and issues and conditions could potentially be well treated with a balanced diet. Because if you're including more balancers, those whole foods I spoke about earlier, you're going to have less of an insulin spike because you're having less glucose spikes. That means less adrenaline spikes just in response to your food. So if I'm going to have 10 adrenal spikes today because of my circumstances, my environment, that's fine if I'm not also having 10 internally from what I ate. I have more capacity internally because I'm not using all my stressful energy and stores on the food I'm processing. I have capacity to manage and deal and respond to stress outside of me because my food is not my primary source of stress. Isn't that fascinating? So even though we can't change the world around us, we can be very aware of what we're putting in our bodies and how that's transforming into a stress response. So, a couple simple things to walk away from this with, because it sounds overwhelming, I know. It's actually quite easy. All we're looking to do is slow and reduce the amount of glucose we're getting from our foods. How do we do that? Pair things that are carbohydrates with fats and proteins. If you want bread, have a slice or two of bread. Just make sure to put avocado, guacamole, hummus, or nut butter on the bread. If you love fruit, have some fruit. Just have it with some nuts or seeds as well. If you want to have some pasta for dinner, have pasta for dinner. Make sure to have some steamed green vegetables or a salad with some kind of salmon or chicken or eggs or vegan protein of your choice before you eat the pasta or with the pasta. Combining fats and proteins with your carbohydrates and your more refined foods is going to slow and reduce the amount of glucose spikes you get, which means less insulin response, which means less of an adrenal response just because of blood sugar. So sit with this, try it out, and see where it takes you. I'll see you next time. Thank you for watching today's episode. Please like and subscribe if you found it useful, and let me know in the comments what you want me to cover next. I have developed a 4-week self-paced course that takes 18 years of my personal and professional experience and puts it into one place where you can easily and quickly learn the foundations of recovering from stress and trauma. How does the food you eat affect your stress levels? How do the relationships in your life create stress or peace? How does the relationship you have with your body allow you to feel happier and more settled? I will cover all this and so much more in this 4-week self-paced course. And the best part, it's self-paced. You don't have to sign up at a certain date or finish it at a certain time. It's yours for life, and it's waiting there for you when you're ready to finish it. Throughout this course, I'll be teaching you philosophies and practices that combine my 3 favorite modalities: somatic experiencing, embodied parts work, and nutrition. For more information on this course, click on the link in my episode details.